I'm standing at the edge of a ballroom holding a navy blue box wrapped with a silver ribbon, and my father just told 300 people that not every child has what it takes. He didn't say my name, but every single person in that room knew exactly who he meant. The laughter that followed, polite and sharp, cut deeper than any silence ever could. I felt the blood drain from my face, but my hands stayed steady. I stood up. Every eye in the room turned toward me. I walked forward slowly, heels clicking against polished marble, not rushing, not shrinking. I reached the edge of the stage and looked directly at him. My voice didn't shake when I spoke. "From your biggest failure," I said calmly, handing him the gift. "Enjoy your retirement." Then I turned and walked away. Not a single part of me looked back. But here's what nobody knew in that moment. What was inside that box would haunt him far more than any public confrontation ever could. And the truth is, I'd been carrying that gift for 20 years, waiting for the right moment to finally let it go. My name is Emma Harrison. I'm 34 years old, and I'm the lead systems director at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena. I oversee a team of 42 engineers working on deep space satellite systems. Last year, our division helped coordinate the landing sequence for a Mars rover that's currently collecting samples from the Jezero crater. It's the kind of achievement that makes headlines, the kind most people dream about their entire careers. But when I called home to tell my family, my father asked if I was still doing that telescope stuff. That's who Richard Harrison is, a man who spent 42 years building rockets and aerospace systems, who rose from junior draftsman to CEO, who can name every engineer who ever worked under him. But he can't remember what his own daughter does for a living. Growing up in Austin, Texas, the Harrison house was clean, orderly, and emotionally sterile. Affection was rationed like it cost extra. My brothers Brandon and Tyler were the golden children. Football captains, Eagle Scouts, military-bound. Everything they did was celebrated. Everything I did was questioned. I remember being 11 years old, building a model rocket from scrap parts I'd collected from Dad's workshop. It actually launched. 30 feet straight up in our backyard before the parachute deployed perfectly. My mother clapped and took photos. My father asked if I'd stolen the parts without permission. That was the moment I learned that no matter what I accomplished, it would never be enough. Not because I wasn't capable, but because I wasn't one of his sons. I graduated with honors in aerospace engineering from the University of Michigan. I worked 2 jobs to cover what scholarships didn't, sleeping 4 hours a night, living on instant ramen and black coffee. Graduation day came on a sunny Saturday in May. The stadium was packed with families cheering, taking photos, crying with pride. I walked across that stage alone. No one from my family came. My father sent a text 3 hours later. It said, "Congrats, didn't realize that was today." I sat in my apartment that night, still wearing my cap and gown, eating cold pizza, wondering what I'd done wrong. The answer, I would later realize, was nothing. I'd simply been born the wrong gender in a family that only valued sons, but I kept trying. I took a position at Caltech's Jet Propulsion Lab that summer. I worked double shifts, volunteered for every impossible project, submitted patents, co-authored research papers. By 29, I was leading a division team. By 31, I was the youngest female engineering director in the organization's history. Trade publications wrote about me. Universities invited me to speak. Colleagues called me a trailblazer. But at every family holiday, when my father raised his glass to toast, he only mentioned Brandon and Tyler. Their promotions, their achievements, their futures. I was always just there, invisible. The daughter who wandered off into some science thing nobody really understood. 3 weeks ago, I received a formal invitation to my father's retirement gala. Black tie, Hilton ballroom, speeches and awards, a celebration of his 42-year career. I almost threw it away. Almost. But something made me keep it. Maybe it was hope. That stupid, stubborn hope that lives in the corners of your heart even when logic tells you to let it die. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe after all these years, he'd finally see me. So I bought a plane ticket. I booked a hotel room, and I spent an entire week trying to write a speech that wouldn't make things worse. The gift came to me on a Tuesday afternoon while I was cleaning out old storage boxes in my closet. Buried under college textbooks and forgotten journals, I found a worn manila folder. Inside was a photograph, faded but still clear. Me at 12 years old, standing at a local science fair, holding a blue ribbon. First place, district-wide. I'd built a scale model of the International Space Station from soda cans, wire, and determination. My father stood beside me in the photo, his hand on my shoulder, smiling. A real smile, not the corporate mask he usually wore. That moment, frozen in time, was the last time I ever remembered him looking at me like I mattered. I stared at that photo for a long time. Then I took it to a frame shop and had it professionally mounted in a simple silver frame. I wrapped it carefully in navy blue paper with a silver ribbon. Understated, elegant, just like everything in the Harrison family. And I wrote a note on plain cardstock in my neatest handwriting. This was the last time you looked at me like I mattered. I spent 20 years chasing that version of you. I'm done now. The night before the party, I stood in my hotel bathroom rehearsing a speech I wasn't even sure I wanted to give. Something polite, neutral, expected. Because that's how I'd survived most of my life, trying not to give him more reasons to be disappointed. Behind me in the mirror's reflection, the gift box sat on the dresser. I couldn't shake the feeling that tomorrow would change everything. I just didn't know how much. I arrived at the Hilton 20 minutes early because anxiety makes me overcompensate. The valet reached for my keys and I hesitated. My black Tesla wasn't flashy by Los Angeles standards, but here in Texas, it screamed tech girl trying too hard. I handed over the keys anyway and walked through the golden revolving doors into the lobby. The ballroom was already half full. Round tables dressed in white linen, centerpieces tall enough to block conversation. Waiters gliding between guests like shadows. Classical music played softly from hidden speakers. Everything was perfectly orchestrated, sterile, just like my childhood. A massive projection screen dominated the far wall, playing a looped slideshow of my father's career. Photos of him in his 20s standing in front of rocket prototypes. Shaking hands with military generals, receiving awards in boardrooms, posing with engineering teams. 42 years compressed into 3 minutes of repeating images. I watched the entire loop twice. Not a single family photo appeared. No Christmas mornings, no birthday parties, no kids graduating. Just Richard Harrison in various suits and hard hats, building his legacy one project at a time. The message was clear. Work was family. Achievement was love. Everything else was decorative. I spotted my mother across the room. Margaret Harrison wore a pale blue dress and pearl earrings, her silver hair perfectly styled. She saw me and waved, a small, discreet motion like someone afraid of drawing attention. She'd spent 35 years supporting my father's career, hosting dinner parties, maintaining the perfect home, raising 3 children who learned early that Dad's work always came first. She caught my eye and smiled, then quickly looked away. Even now, she was afraid to be caught paying too much attention to me. Look who finally showed up. The voice came from behind me. I turned to find Brandon, my older brother, looking like a politician in training. Tailored navy suit, perfect teeth, military posture. Tyler stood beside him, adjusting his tie, giving me a brief nod of acknowledgement. Still working at NASA or SpaceX or whatever it is? Brandon asked, pulling me into a hug that felt like a business transaction. Still at JPL, I answered, keeping my voice neutral. Oh, right, the telescope place, Tyler added with a dismissive smile. Dad always says that's more science club than real engineering. I smiled tightly, swallowing the urge to remind them that our team had just successfully landed equipment on another planet. Instead, I said, well, we did help put a rover on Mars last year, so I guess we're doing something right. They laughed, not unkindly, just dismissively, and moved on to greet another cluster of bitsi, guests. And just like that, I was back in high school. Invisible. The girl with the wrong kind of dreams. A waiter passed with champagne flutes on a silver tray. I took one and moved toward the windows, watching the sunset over downtown Austin. Across the room, my father held court, surrounded by executives and former colleagues. Richard Harrison at 65 looked exactly like he did at 40. Tall, composed, commanding. His laugh boomed across the ballroom. He clapped hands on shoulders, gestured broadly. told stories everyone had heard before. He looked at Brandon and Tyler with obvious pride. He kissed my mother's cheek. But he never once glanced in my direction. The lights dimmed. A woman in a black pantsuit stepped to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, if you could please take your seats. Tonight we celebrate a titan of industry, a man who dedicated over 4 decades to aerospace advancement. Please welcome the one and only Richard Harrison." Thunderous applause erupted. People stood. My father walked to the stage, waving like a senator, pausing for dramatic effect before he reached the podium. The spotlight followed him. He was in his element, the center of attention, the man of the hour. Thank you," he began, his voice filling every corner of the room. "This has been the journey of a lifetime, and I wouldn't be standing here without the support of my incredible family." My chest tightened. I sat up straighter in my chair. He smiled, that practiced corporate smile I'd seen 1,000 times. My sons, Brandon and Tyler, have always made me proud. Both of them followed in my footsteps. Both chose to serve, to lead, to build. Everything I've achieved, I owe to them. They represent the Harrison name with strength and honor. The crowd erupted in applause. People actually stood up to cheer for my brothers. Brandon and Tyler stood at their table, waving modestly, soaking in the validation. My father waited for the noise to settle, then his expression shifted. His tone became softer, almost nostalgic, like he was about to share something profound. He paused for effect. "Not every child has what it takes," he said slowly. "And that's okay. Not everyone is cut from the same cloth. Some wander." He didn't say my name. He didn't need to. The glances, the awkward shifting in seats, the whispered murmurs, they all pointed directly at me. Polite laughter rippled through the room, small and sharp, and it cut deeper than any silence ever could. My mother's face went pale. Brandon looked uncomfortable. Tyler stared at his plate. And my father, standing in the spotlight, continued talking about legacy and tradition and passing the torch to those who truly understood what it meant to carry the family name. That's when I stood up. The room went silent. Every eye turned toward me. I reached down and picked up the navy blue box I'd placed carefully under my chair. My hands were steady. My breathing was calm. I walked forward, heels clicking, against marble, each step deliberate and measured. I didn't rush. I didn't shrink. I walked past tables of strangers and colleagues and family friends who'd watched me grow up invisible. I reached the edge of the stage. My father stood frozen at the podium, microphone in hand, finally looking directly at me for the first time all night. I held the box out in both hands. My voice carried across the silent ballroom, clear and unwavering. "From your biggest failure," I said. "Enjoy your retirement." I placed the box on the edge of the stage, then I turned and walked away. Past the tables, past the shocked faces, past my brothers and my mother and 300 people who'd just witnessed something they didn't fully understand. I walked out of that ballroom with my head high, and I didn't look back once. I didn't drive away immediately. Instead, I sat in my car in the parking garage, engine off, hands gripping the steering wheel. My chest felt tight, but not with panic. What I felt was colder, slower, like standing in a snowstorm you'd seen coming for years and only now decided to walk into. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat, a text from Mom. Then another from my college roommate Sophia, who'd begged me not to attend tonight. Then one from Tyler. What was in the box? I didn't answer. I already knew what was happening inside that ballroom right now, the moment I'd walked out of but hadn't entirely left behind. My father wouldn't open the box immediately, not in front of the crowd. He was too controlled for that, too concerned with appearances. But curiosity would win eventually. It always did with Richard Harrison, the man who needed to understand everything, to control every variable, to never be caught off guard. I imagined him backstage, away from the cameras, carefully pulling off the silver ribbon, lifting the lid, seeing the framed photograph staring back at him. The photo showed both of us at that science fair when I was 12. Me holding my first place ribbon, beaming with pride. Him with his hand on my shoulder, actually smiling. A genuine smile, not the practiced corporate expression he used in every professional photo. That moment captured the last time he'd looked at me like I was worth something. The last time he'd seemed proud. Before I became the daughter who didn't fit his vision, who asked too many questions, who wanted to build rockets instead of supporting the men who did. Beneath the photo, tucked into the frame, was my note. This was the last time you looked at me like I mattered. I spent 20 years chasing that version of you. I'm done now. Simple. Clear. Final. My phone lit up again. This time it was a notification from Instagram. Someone had posted a video clip from the retirement speech. The audio was muffled, but you could see everything. My father's dismissive words, me standing up, walking to the stage, handing him the box, then leaving. The caption read, "When you finally stop asking for approval and start demanding respect." The video already had 3,000 views and climbing. I scrolled through the comments. Some people thought it was staged, performative. Others called it a power move. A few criticized me for ruining his special night. But what struck me most were the direct messages flooding my inbox. "I wish I had your courage. That line from your biggest failure destroyed me." He sounds exactly like my father. My hands are shaking watching this. These were strangers, but they understood. They'd lived versions of my story. Daughters overlooked, achievements dismissed, worth questioned. For the first time in my life, I wasn't invisible. People were seeing me, really seeing me, not as a footnote in someone else's legacy, but as the author of my own. My phone rang. Mom. I stared at her name on the screen, thumb hovering over the answer button. On the 6th ring, I picked up. "Emma." Her voice was brittle and urgent. "What was in that box?" "You already know," I said quietly. There was noise in the background, muffled and tense. My father's voice, low and sharp. She didn't speak for a moment. Then, "You blindsided him." I almost laughed. "No, Mom, he's been blindsiding me for 30 years. Silence stretched between us. Finally, she whispered, "He didn't mean to hurt you, sweetheart. He just doesn't know how to show emotions. He was raised to believe feelings are weakness." "I wasn't asking for tears," I said, my voice flat. "Just acknowledgement. And after tonight, I'm done asking." I ended the call before she could respond. Because the truth was, I didn't trust what would come next. Another excuse. Another explanation. Another reason why I should understand, forgive, accept. I'd spent my entire life understanding. Tonight, I chose myself. The next morning, I turned my phone off and spent hours walking through downtown Austin. Coffee shops, bookstores, the trail along Lady Bird Lake. It felt surreal, watching joggers and families and tourists living their normal Saturday while my entire world had shifted. By noon, I turned my phone back on. 38 unread messages. I skipped the ones from Brandon and Tyler. I already knew what they'd say. Defend Dad. Accuse me of being dramatic, selfish, attention-seeking. Tell me I'd embarrass the family. But one message stopped me cold. From Dad. Just 2 words. "We need to talk." I stared at those 5 syllables for a long time. There was no anger in them, no apology either. Just a summons. An expectation that I'd come when called. Like always. Except this time felt different. Because I wasn't the same person who'd walked into that ballroom yesterday. I'd left something behind in that moment. Not just the gift box, but the desperate need for his approval. The fantasy that someday he'd look at me and say I was enough. That evening, I found myself driving toward my childhood home. Not out of obligation, but curiosity. Maybe closure. The house looked exactly the same. Red brick, manicured lawn, porch light always on. Nothing ever changed here, even when everything had. I let myself in with the key I'd never returned. Inside, it smelled like lemon polish and old memories. I found him in the den, sitting in his leather armchair, holding the framed photograph. He didn't look up when I entered. For a full minute, we existed in silence, the only sound the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Then, without looking at me, he spoke. "I don't remember that day." "Of course you don't," I said. "It was important to me." That made him flinch. Subtle, But there. He set the photo on the coffee table between us like evidence neither of us wanted to touch. You think I never cared? He asked. I don't think it, I replied. I lived it. I pushed you, he said quietly, because I saw something in you. Something sharp, unrelenting. No, I corrected. You pushed me away. There's a difference. Finally, he looked at me. Really looked. I didn't know how to handle you. You weren't like the boys. You didn't seek approval. You challenged everything. You challenged me. I folded my arms. And that made me less worthy of respect? He hesitated, like the answer was more complicated than he wanted to admit. You reminded me of your grandfather, he finally said. The way you questioned everything. The way you hated tradition just for tradition's sake. He never approved of me either. Never thought I was good enough for this family's name. There it was, the generational wound passed down like a curse. So I spent my life being punished for something that had nothing to do with me, I said. You were never a failure, Emma, he replied. I just didn't know how to raise a daughter like you. You didn't try, I said. You just ignored me until I stopped trying to be seen. He looked at me again, and for the first time, I saw something raw in his eyes. I saw you, he said. I just didn't know what to do with what I saw. That was the closest I'd ever get to an apology. And strangely, it was enough. Not because it fixed anything. It didn't. But because I finally understood. I'd spent 34 years trying to earn something he was never equipped to give, and that wasn't my failure. It was his. 2 weeks later, I flew back to Los Angeles. The plane soared over mountains and coastline, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was escaping. I was simply going home. Back to JPL, back to work that mattered, back to a life I'd built with my own hands. No family name carrying me, just hard work, late nights, and the belief that rejection could become fuel. My division head stopped by my office on my second day back. You're still good for the keynote next month? She asked. I blinked. The STEM Leadership Summit. You're our first female lead invited in over a decade. Given your background, your story could mean something to the younger women in the audience. I knew what she meant by background, not just the engineering degrees or the patents. She meant the fact that I'd succeeded despite my family, not because of them. I'm in, I said. Absolutely. That night, I sat on my balcony overlooking the city and opened my laptop. The first line came instantly. Sometimes the greatest fuel for a rocket isn't fire. It's rejection. I wrote about growing up invisible, about how brilliance gets ignored when it doesn't fit the expected narrative, about learning that you're not obligated to prove yourself to people who refuse to see you. I ended with a message I wish someone had told me at 16, at 22, at 30. Some legacies are worth breaking, and sometimes the most revolutionary thing you can do is walk away, not in anger, but in clarity. The speech went viral within 48 hours. News outlets picked it up. STEM organizations shared it. Young women sent messages saying, "You told my story," but that wasn't the point. The point was I'd finally told mine. My brothers never reached out after the party. That was fine. I'd stopped chasing people who only saw me as a problem. Mom called occasionally. Our conversations were cautious, gentle, like walking on ice. But slowly, things thawed. I should have done more, she said once. I know, I replied. But I also know you loved me, even if you couldn't show it in front of him. 3 months later, a small envelope arrived with no return address. Inside was the photograph, the same one I'd given my father. On the back, written in his sharp block handwriting, was a note. I didn't forget this day. I tried to, because it scared me how much I loved that version of you. You deserved more than I gave. I'm sorry. No signature, no warm closing, just that. I folded the note and placed it in a drawer where I used to keep every disappointing birthday card he'd ever sent. The drawer wasn't filled with pain anymore. It was filled with perspective. Because sometimes the apology doesn't come the way you wanted. Sometimes it doesn't come until after you've stopped needing it. And that's what healing looks like. Not clean, not cinematic, but real. And enough. So if you've ever felt like the invisible one, the failure, the one who didn't fit, know this. You don't have to earn someone's love to be worthy of it. Walk tall, walk forward, and if you need to, walk away. If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about finding strength in the moments that break us.